All right. Yeah, well, each week it gets weirder, but as I learned from Michael Heiser, the weird stuff in the Bible is there on purpose. It's not, randomly just thrown in there just so you go, wonder what that is, and then move on. Now, it's there because the Bible also teaches us that treasure is hidden and kings seek it. So, you are royalty. I don't know if you know that or not, but you'll learn more about that today if we get to that, because we are royal people. And so, because of that, when we study the unseen realm, we come across some pretty bizarre stuff. And so we're just exploring right now this supernatural worldview. And you guys know our objectives. I'll keep that in there now at the beginning so that anybody who's new to the videos can pause it and read it. But I'll move on. All right. So our agenda, we are on lesson 8. And we're studying the Holy War. We have a few more lessons in lesson 8. So I have like part A, B, C, D, or part 1, 2, 3, etc. Then we'll have 3 more after that. Lesson 9, 10, 11. And, I think that you'll enjoy this series on the Holy War about those Nephilims and the battle of the giants. And then we'll get into outwitting evil, the strategy that God used. And then we'll talk about partaking of divine nature. And then we will end this series on what's it mean we're going to rule over angels. Some weird stuff that, rarely can you get a pastor to even talk about it. So it's going to be fun to explore those. All right. So we're in part 2 of 4. And you remember the lesson was you were to read Numbers 13 and Joshua 11. Today we get into Numbers 13 and be ready to discuss giants. What are they? What's going on there? Genocide. When God said to Israel, kill them all. What? Why did he say that? And what's going on there? And we'll learn, he did the same thing with the flood, right? Killed them all. So this is some hard stuff. And a lot of pastors don't want to cover this kind of stuff in public. So we shut the door, we do it in private. No. No, I think it's stuff that anything that's in the Bible is fair game to be discussed. And we should all feel that way. We should not feel like, hide me from what's in the Bible. I don't want to be hidden from it. I want it revealed. Yes, I want to know more. And then the Canaanite gods. It's horrible. We're not going to touch on much of that today, but next week it gets pretty gross. Okay, so you youngsters, you're welcome to be there, but it definitely gets pretty gross. So I won't use the gross vocabulary today. But they're teenagers, so you've already been exposed to more stuff than I ever was when I was your age. So I'm going to move on now. This week, what are we studying? The Nephilim, the before and after the flood, and then the 12 spies of Israel. So that starts us down this track. All right. So I told you last time that we do zip it all back together. We do sew up one, back up, sew it again. So backtrack sewing. Is that what you guys called it?
Yeah.
Okay. So a little bit about that. We had this last week in Genesis chapter 6, verses 1 through 4. When man began to multiply on the face of the land and daughters were born to them, the sons of God, the Hebrew is the B'nai Halalim, saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took them as their wives as they chose. Then the Lord said, my spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came in to the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. Okay, so we covered that last week. Any comments or anything you'd like to bring up before we go past this page?
Well, it says on there, any they chose. Was that, because I know in the Jewish tradition, the women don't get to choose their husbands per se. They have a matchmaker
Well, these are the Nephilims who are choosing, yes, and their fathers are not involved. Also, this is not a Jewish culture. This is pre-flood.
Right, okay.
You know, long before the days of Moses and the Levite laws. All right, but the impression we get from this, it could be either forcefully took the women,
Yes.
or the women voluntarily had this relationship because these were awesome creatures, you know, the Benaim. Yes.
I've been led to believe that they were like rock stars. Women were groupies to them. They
Okay.
wanted to be.
So that could be true. If you know, the rock star sons of God and the women who have those relationships will be the leaders. Okay, so this is, you know, if you go back and look at any of the mythologies of the Greeks, the Romans, and even as we did last week, all the way over to America, these relationships were very, what could we say? People thought it was cool.
Yeah.
All right, and God did not think it was cool. So, with that, we now get to so we've talked about those mighty men of old, and now the flood has occurred. Was there any discussion about the flood?
Yes, I was surprised because it says man's life would be 120 years, and I always thought, I always had a problem with that because they live so old, but yet it's 120 years.
Right.
But I didn't, you made it so clear that it was 120 years after the flood.
Till the flood.
Till the flood?
It was okay. So this is the sequence that happened.
I thought it
Noah's 500 years old. He gets told, right? The flood comes when he's 600 years old. So there's at least 100 years there, all right? But we also know that all these men after the flood kept on living longer. But slowly over time, their age, they died earlier and earlier until you get to, let's see, Moses. How old was Moses when he died? Okay, he's there for 40 years. He goes in the desert for 40 years, and he teaches them for 40 years. How old is he? All right. So he's 120. And then how about Joshua? Joshua takes over at what age? So we have a lot of math in our heads, don't we?
Too much.
Yeah. You know, so Joshua, when he starts helping out Moses, he's 40. He goes through the desert. He's now 80. He enters into the promised land at 80 years of age. Okay. And then he only lives for just a while longer. We'll let you discover that as we go along because we're going to talk about him for quite a bit. He's the one that helped clean up the giants out of the promised land. That was his task. All right. So their ages went down. Today, and there's other Bible verses about ages, and 70 is now considered to be the old age, but in our system, in our system, we are finding out that they're expecting if you were born in this past generation, so they're really young, they will live potentially up to 120 years old. Okay. Because they think that the genetics and there's just a lot of improvements in health and care, but at the same time, there's a lot of not good improvements. And so they might be counting on the transhumanism, and we're going to get into that. Transhumanism is the taking technology and helping to change the human so that your body will live longer. And then potentially, and you may have heard about this, it's all science fiction, but people are working on this. Actually, real scientists are working on this, how to transfer the mind to machines. Weird stuff out there. Yeah. And but we had the flood that happened here. And from the flood, what was the purpose of the flood, by the way? We talked about that last week. There's evil corruption in the entire planet. And we also learned that when we study the Hebrew of Noah, and we find out that Noah was perfect, unblemished. He was a genetic person that God says, you're approved. And he used him and his family. So think of that. His family, those 3 sons. That's pretty important. And those 3 sons had wives each, 1 each. That's very important too, because then all the rest of what happens after Noah's flood is all of us. We're the results of all of that. So genetically, I was just reading a paper last night, just for fun of it, and it was talking about finding out that there really is scientifically and genetically 1 female to all of us that we all came from. No kidding. Yeah, we know that from the Bible, but they can know that now from the mother's mitochondria DNA. Okay, and then this is really shocking to them. They found out that there's also 1 Adam, 1 man, and they jokingly called it, the seed of Adam. And then they found out after researching that yes, we really all go back to 1 man also. Well, evolution says we should go back to lots of different types of creatures. Not all 1 man. I'll get into that later in another lesson. But I just thought it was fascinating that science is now starting to show us that the Bible is very, very accurate. And I like it when a scientist goes out and tries to disprove the Bible, because they have a lot of problems with that.
They get rid of the face.
Yeah. So we had the flood, and then we saw earlier. Well, let me back up and maybe this one right here. It says the Nephilim at the bottom. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterward. So in the days before the flood, there were the Nephilim, and then after the flood, there was the Nephilim. So I want to make sure we know this what it's saying there, because now we're going to study, what do you mean after the flood? Have you thought about that? Okay, it made sense how they happened the first time.
Yeah.
Okay? And to make it clear to anybody who's coming into the study for the first time, the sons of God are angels that we would normally say angels. Or they're divine. They are, and also that they made it with the women and produced the Nephilim. Nephilim came from that. Okay? But now the Nephilims are all killed off with the flood. Where did the second group come from? So we're going to study a little bit more of that. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterward. I forgot I put that in there as a lead-in. All right. So how did the Nephilim survive the flood?
I don't think they did. I think they're eternal beings.
Okay. We have a couple votes here saying no, they didn't survive.
Didn't the angels just get mischievous again and
Oh,
create another
is it
generation?
those sons of God did something again?
Yeah.
Okay.
because
What else?
They weren't wiped out by the flood.
The bloodline of the women that married Noah's sons.
Yeah, you think genetically they somehow were tainted?
If Noah was the only one that was perfect,
No, we don't say he's the only one.
well, his bloodline was perfect.
We know he personally is.
So his wife, his sons,
Yeah.
well, his sons
All right.
but the women that his sons.
So this is another one that the rabbis will say, potentially Ham's wife. They always blame Ham for everything. Ham's wife might have genetically been tainted, carrying the genomes of a Nephilim, potentially. Okay, so that's another argument. So we have so far, no, maybe they those fallen angels did it again.
Yes.
Then we have genetics passed on from maybe one of the wives of Noah. Not Noah, but his children. What else?
They're eternal beings. Just
The
like
Nephilims are eternal.
Just like we're eternal beings. We're either going to eternally die or eternally live.
Okay, so how does that mean physically, though, for them to happen again
To repopulate.
after the flood?
Well, they just come back.
All right, so let's explore this a little bit more. What do you think are some of the positions scholars now say to explain this? What do you think a scholar would think? See, we could throw out a whole bunch of wild stuff here, but how about these guys and gals who study all this out in the original language, and what do they think? And I also told you about the rabbi said that, Ham's wife.
Could it be that the flood was not worldwide?
The flood wasn't worldwide. It was local.
There's a lot of them that say that.
Yeah, okay. So I'm getting a lot of people frowning at me like, you are crazy, Curtis. Hey, we're scholars now, aren't we? We're open to, let's analyze every single one of these and then get to the point where we can either dismiss it or accept it. All
I
right?
thought last week we learned that it was worldwide.
Yeah, what did we learn last week? We even looked at other
Continent.
tribes from all around the world. They all had the stories of the flood, and they also had the stories of the giants, and some of them even had the stories of the demigods that came from them, those giants, and that they were the reason for the flood. Some of those stories came out, so that's interesting. But scholars, let's see. One, the flood was only regional. The Nephilim just migrated to a different region that wasn't flooded. All right? So you're all shaking your heads no. I'm in a classroom of Baptists. Okay. But you're a Baptists who are scholars. Okay. Now look,
Question.
then what about those animals? If it was a local flood, the animals could just move out of the way. They don't have to stay in the flood area. Birds can fly away. So
They're gonna land.
if it's only a local flood, they're going to get over to a place that's not flooded.
Then why are they finding shell fragments and shell?
Yeah. So there's a lot of evidence that there was a global catastrophe, with flooding. But my point is this. We're keeping it simple because we won't have a lot of time to go into every one of these. But we're given the most important things that totally disprove it. And the very first thing here is, if it's local, why did Noah have to build a boat to put all the animals in it? Animals just run away from the area. Or they drown. But they can still get away.
Well, what gets me is how much of a notice did the Nephilim get that there was a flood coming for them to migrate out of the region?
Yeah, so how would anybody else know that there's a flood coming? Well, once the flood starts.
How many do they believe?
Yeah, once it starts,
It came
It's true fast, but
fast, and they didn't believe it.
all right.
spirit beings, so they just go back.
Yep. So, all these animals got on a boat.
So you're saying that maybe they had the ability to cross the veil?
Cross the what? The veil.
Cross into the other realm?
Oh.
They're spiritual
They
beings.
can go and come back. Is what
They're
you're
sons
saying.
of God.
No, we're not talking about those angels.
The Nephilim.
We're talking about Nephilim.
Oh, I thought that was the angels.
How did the Nephilim survive the flood? Don't confuse those with the B'nai Elohim. Nephilim are giants. B'nai Elohim are angels. We're not talking about angels.
Caves and them.
All right, so this is a real basic answer. I'm going to move on. I got a lot more to cover. We're going to run out of time. But I'm just letting you know what scholars think, and then they go and research this, and then they start to realize, okay, maybe the flood was bigger. All right. Let's see what we got here. Maybe the Nephilim hung on to the ark. At least one. That's the rabbi story. You guys want to hear it? No. Okay. You guys, there's a giant later in the Bible named Og, O-G. Okay, King Og. And the rabbis say Og hung on to the ark and crawled to the top of the roof, and Noah cut a hole for him to feed him that whole time that he was there. No, that sounds so stupid. All right. A stowaway. Maybe there was one that snuck on board.
But they're big. How would he stay hidden?
How's it staying hidden? I'm giving you what real scholars have dealt with. Okay? I found all kinds of commentaries naming these things. All right?
Maybe they could shapeshift.
Well, no, none of that. These are giants. But, we know for a fact that the ark was on the waters for over a year. Hanging on that boat for over a year? No. Stowaway for over a year? No. Anyways, so Noah and his family are on the ark for 377 days before they finally touch land again. The scripture says the flood was global, and all living things were killed except Noah and those who were on the ark. Where does it say that? Genesis 7:21. Every living thing that moved on land perished. Birds, livestock, wild animals, all the creatures that swarm over the earth, and all mankind. Every living creature. This is a global flood. So we're re-emphasizing that. All right, so the Nephilim did not survive the flood. That's the point.
This is a little, just for FYI kind of thing, is in geology, when you drill down 5,000 or 6,000 feet, there are seashells down there. There's sand like it's from a beach.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah. There's lots of evidence. I got a lot of technical scientific books in my library that prove the flood. So there's just a lot of evidence. And if a person denies it, they're just, ostriches with their heads in the sand.
Now, the thing
All right.
says it destroyed everything.
Everything.
But it didn't destroy the fish in the sea.
A lot of them died from the cataclysm. We have a lot of fossils in the ocean also from the sea animals. But the thing that God was focused on was things on the surface. There's a reason for that. We're going to get to that as we get further in our study. The corruption was on the surface also. All right. Well, let's go further because, like I said, there's a lot to cover today. We may not get to it at this rate. But I don't mind going slower. But I do want to get you the 12 tribes since I gave you a handout. Okay, so the offspring from the sons of God and daughters of men. The wording in Genesis 6:4 is pointing forward to some later event that's going to happen with giants. It says it happened before and after, right? So it's pointing forward to something else that's going to happen after the flood. Right. And so it's getting us prepared for these giant clans that are in the land of Israel. Because Joshua's going to have to fight them. Okay, so it's preparing us for that. It's suggesting that other sons of God fathered Nephilims after the flood. A repeat incident of the sons of God with women. Again, all over.
yeah.
All right. Which also would be so the Titans occurred after the flood as well. If you hear, the mythologies, they went for quite a long time. So just getting you ready. As a result, there'd be no, we don't have to worry about the original Nephilim surviving the flood. They didn't. They all died off. But there is a dilemma now. What's going to happen with these new giants and what's going on with that? The conclusion, though, is that the later appearance of the other Nephilims occurred by the same means that happened before the flood. Okay, we don't have to come up with a whole new story hung on to the ark. Okay? And, or they moved out of the local area. No, we don't need to come up with stupid stuff like that. Let's just go with the Word of God, analyze it like it is, and see what it tells us. So stage 1 is now set for Numbers 13. That's why we're going to get to Numbers 13 today. Okay? Numbers 13, Numbers, by the way, is in the Torah, the first 5 books written by Moses. Okay? So we're going to now dig into those a little bit deeper. All right. So in Numbers 13, the Hebrews call this the Meriglim. And so you may come across that word if you do any research on the internet or you're studying the commentaries. The Meriglim, that's the spies. The story of the spies. Okay, so let's start reading it. We're in chapter 13. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Send men to spy out the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the people of Israel. From each tribe of their fathers you shall send a man, every one a chief among them." So Moses sent them from the wilderness of Paran, according to the command of the Lord, all of them men who were heads of the people of Israel. Who are these spies? One from each tribe, their chief. They're chief from each tribe. These are not just, okay, we need some volunteers. All right? We need the lowest level person because if it gets killed, we don't care. No. They took the top level person, the chief of each tribe who had full influence over those tribes to be a member of the spy team.
Oh, full influence.
They could fully influence their tribe. They are the chief. And God says, let them be the ones chosen. All right. Verse 17. Moses sent them to spy out the land of Canaan and said to them, go up into the Negev, go up into the hill country, and see what the land is, and whether the people who dwell in it are strong or weak, whether they are few or many, and whether the land that they dwell in is good or bad, and whether the cities that they dwell in are camps or strongholds. Strongholds means fortified. And whether the land is rich or poor, and whether there are trees in it or not. Be of good courage and bring some of the fruit of the land. Now the time was the season of the first ripe grapes. Why is that thrown in there? The season of the first ripe grapes.
So you know what it is.
Because the grapes are giant.
Nothing in here by accident. This becomes very important. And all the symbolism, they're historical, real things, but also they have spiritual meaning.
Does it mean it's the first, you give the first fruits or you sacrifice?
The first fruits, and they're told, bring back,
Yeah, so.
from that adventure. All right, so anyways, these guys, they got a task. Do you know how many things they were told to take care of? Did you count them all? Okay, and then the paper I gave you is a summary of the 12 spies, and it tells you how many charges or commands were given to them. 8. There are 8 charges to them, to see what the land's like, to see whether the Canaanites are strong or weak, few or many, good or bad land, etc. So there's some notes for you. All right, let's go on, see what's going on. So now we find out that this is the trip they took. And I gave you a picture of it as a handout so you'd be able to see it better than from a distance. I think, Caspian over there has got eagle eyes, but he probably still can't read some of these. True. So I gave you a handout. And then let's go through it and see what they did. So the spies, they started down at the bottom in the south side here at Kadesh Barnea. They're in the wilderness. And when you see the word wilderness in the Bible, in the Old Testament, wilderness is another word for desert. They're in the desert. Okay? So this they start from the bottom, they start heading north. And secretly. They're not letting people know that they're spying. All right? So they're secret. And they go for 3 weeks. And they go from the desert of Zin in the south. And that Zin is pronounced sin. And they go up beyond Beersheba. Beersheba is where Isaac has settled 300 years earlier. So they're going through the land that their founding fathers used to live in. And they go past Shechem. That's where Jacob set up the altar. And that's where he also bought a tomb. All right? And then they keep going north. And then they continue to Rehob and Lebo Hamath, also known as the Hamath Pass. And they go all the way to the far top north of Canaan, up to near Damascus. So this is not a simple little trip. These guys are traveling the entire length along the mountainside, and then they're going to turn around and come back along the coast plano areas so they can see both types of land. All right?
These cities were already in existence.
These cities are all there. Okay. There are people living there. There are Nephilims living there. There are lots of things happening. And all these little towns are all significant.
And they were gone 40 days, it said?
They're going to be gone total of 40 days. But first they start off, they go for 3 weeks, which is what I start off with. And then they start spreading out and checking out all the different cities, infiltrating into those and trying to figure out, okay, if these are going to be our enemies, how are we going to handle them? And now we get back, on their way back, going south now, they pass Hebron. Hebron is where Abraham was buried. It's still there, okay? So these spies are going through significant things in their family history. They're checking it all out. And They cut a large cluster of grapes from the valley of Eshcol. Eshcol means a cluster in Hebrew. All right. Before returning after 40 days to the Israelite camp at Kadesh, and they're out in the oasis. Now, what's interesting here is they have a real good handle now after 40 days being in the enemy's land, what the enemy's like. And you guys, let's say that 12 of you are the chiefs, and you did all this. All right? So, you're now going to come back with your report. Check this out. In Numbers 13, verse 25, they give a good report. At the end of 40 days, they returned from spying out the land, and they came to Moses and Aaron and to all the congregation of the people of Israel in the wilderness of Paran at Kadesh. They brought back word to them and to all the congregation, and they showed them the fruit of the land. And they told him, we came to the land to which you sent us. It flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. Do you know who brought back the fruit, by the way? Yeah, Joshua and Caleb. They're the ones that cut the fruit off and brought it back. All right? So they're carrying back. Clusters are so large that a lot of people thought, oh, come on. This is hyperbole. This is literature. It wasn't really that huge. Well, modern day Israel has them also.
Wow! That's crazy.
Yeah. So, I just always love to have stuff that comes up that says, what? So Caleb and Joshua, let's see what else happens. All right. But also the spies gave a bad report. In verse 28, however, the people who dwell in the land are strong, and the cities are fortified and very large. And besides, we saw the descendants of Enoch. The Amalekites dwell in the land of Negeb. The Hittites, the Jebusites, the Amorites, they dwell in the hill country. The Canaanites, they dwell by the sea and along the Jordan. So they're telling Moses and everybody else, there's a lot of people that live here now. This is not, they've been out in the desert over a year. There's nobody out in the desert. And now they're encountering large numbers of people who have fortified cities. There's technology here. Things are happening. But Caleb, do you know what his name means, by the way? Dog. But Dog said, he quieted the people before Moses, and he said, let us go up at once and occupy it, for we are well able to overcome it. Then the men who had gone up with him, okay, these are chiefs. They're supposed to be courageous and lead their people. They had gone with Caleb, and they said, wait, we're not able to go up against the people. They're stronger than we are. So they brought to the people of Israel a bad report of the land that they had spied out, saying, this is the part that really gets everybody else upset. The land through which we have gone to spy out is a land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people that we saw in it are great height. And there we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Enoch, who come from the Nephilim. And we seemed to ourselves like grasshoppers, and so we seemed to them. So those chiefs all said, I don't think we should go into that land.
They didn't have any faith.
No faith at all.
They were tired, too.
They were scared.
Something that just occurred to me, I cannot remember, is this the first time that they've actually gone out and spied out the land?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because before God said go, they went.
No, this is the very first time.
This is the first time.
This is what's going to result with them being left in the desert for 40 years.
Why did Moses decide to do it this way instead of doing it like God had always said to do?
I don't understand what you mean.
Well, okay, why did he suddenly decide that he needed to send out spies?
God told him to.
God told him.
We saw it at the very beginning. God said to them, yeah, God's the one that says send out the spies, not Moses.
Okay.
I just have a question. How did they think they survived 40 days without getting killed?
Yeah. So,
I mean, they were wandering around for 40 days. I mean, somebody's going to get wiped out.
well, so we have the spies are able to stay secret. They didn't get caught. God's watching over them.
That's what I'm saying.
And, God has his angels watching over them because they went into the territory that God does not own. Let's go back to our geography, sacred geography. Territorial. God does not own the land. But he's already said it to Abraham, you and your descendants will have this land. But this land is occupied by Nephilim. That should clue you in right away. There are false gods, as we call them, lesser Elohim, ruling over these people. And those people worship those Elohims. Elohim is plural already. I put an S for no reason. All right. So you have Moloch. You have other gods that they sacrifice to. We're going to learn about that next week. All right. So there's a lot going on here, but the Nephilim says that, hey, they're sons of Enoch. We're going to learn about Enoch. And it says that we're like grasshoppers. Now, that's definitely hyperbole. Okay. Because if they were truly the size of grasshoppers, then ratio-wise, the Nephilim would have been over 100 feet tall. Yeah. That's not reality. So they do use a little bit of hyperbole out of fear, but they're telling them these people are big.
Those are similes.
I don't care what it's called. My English is so bad right now, my professor keeps sending my paper back to me. Okay.
I want to know how they came back with grapes without them going sour or whatever.
I don't know, but they brought the grapes to them. All right, let's go a little bit further now.
That was the last thing they picked.
Notice it says they're stronger than we are. The land okay, this is weird talk. Is a land that devours its inhabitants. That becomes very important. And all the people we saw are great height. They're very tall. They're bigger than we are. All right. So let's talk about these 12 spies. I gave you this handout. I put it also this morning into my PowerPoint so that people watching online can get a copy of it. All right. But it gives you a summary of all that. That's the only reason I brought it up right now because we might use some of it next week also. I'm not going to go into detail on it right now. All right. But I want you to know that you have a handout. Then we need to, before we get into the battles and the strategies against these giants, we need to ask ourselves, well, for this morning, since we got 9 minutes, how does this apply to us? The story of the 12 tribes. What's the application to our life right now?
Keep it positive.
All right, staying positive. All right. Well, if we look at the story more closely, we may discover there are parallels here with how a Christian's life is. Okay. For example, Israel was freed from the bondage of Egypt. They were chosen to be a holy nation in a covenant relationship with God. And they were told they would be given a home in a wonderful place. And these 10 spies that didn't go along with that because of their fear, they're talking everybody out of it. How many Christians do you know get talked out of a lot of stuff because of fear?
Yeah.
Okay. Right? So, this is the parallel to us. All of us have been freed from the bondage of sin. Now, I get a lot of people saying, no, I'm not. I still sin. One of the testimonies that we have our candidates, Christians who are getting baptized, is in front of everybody. They are asked a question if they've turned their backs on sin. And are they turning to Jesus? In other words, do you recognize you're no longer a slave to sin? Okay, so in Romans 6, it tells us, we know that our old self was crucified with him in order that the body of sin might be brought to nothing, so that we would no longer be enslaved to sin. For one who has died has been set free from sin. So the the truth here, the reality is that sin does not control you. Now, you might give in to temptation and then sin. In which case, 1 John 1:9 says we can confess our sins. He's faithful and just to forgive us and to cleanse us. But notice, these people in old days were free from Egypt, which represents sin. And we're going to learn later, they want to go back to it. You got to read the next chapter. It's really weird. Chapter 14. They get so mad at Joshua and Caleb that they want to stone them. Because they're speaking the truth. How many Christians stand up and really try to correct a church and try to get them in the right direction, and the rest of the church wants to stone them?
Yeah.
These are parallel, okay? This is all teaching us lessons here. Let's go a little bit further. That we also see here, Christians have been chosen to be a holy nation, just like Israel. You know, in 1 Peter 2, it says, "But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession. Once you were not a people, but now you are God's people." As Christians, maybe one time you were just a pagan, but that's no longer true. Once you believe in Jesus as your Lord and Savior, there's an instantaneous removal out of the kingdom of darkness and put into the kingdom of light. And in the kingdom of light, you're royalty. Do you understand that you're royalty? Do you live like it? Do you act like it? Do you think of yourself that way? If not, we need to do some brainwashing. In the positive sense. All right, well, look, Christians will be given a home in a wonderful place where we'll dwell together with God. It says in Revelation 21, "And I saw a holy city, the New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, 'Behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people. And God himself will be with them as their God.'" You realize you're not living in heaven? You're going to be living in the New Jerusalem. Christians get that all mixed up. They all think, well, I die, I'm going to go live in heaven forever. Well, no. If you read Revelation 21, there's going to be a whole entire city where God lives. And do you know how big that city is? 144,000 miles in one direction, 144,000 miles in up direction, 144,000 miles acrosswise. Some people think it's either a cube, like the Borg, if you know Star Trek, or it's a pyramid. Okay? But it's huge. And there's a new heaven and a new earth and that holy city. And God lives in that city, and we will live with him.
And his trees and a river.
Trees, a river. There's a lot going on here. So it's a beautiful place. So these Israelites were told, God's giving you the promised land. And they even came back and said, yes, it's a land of milk and honey. It's so nice. And look at these grapes. This is a great place. Joshua and Caleb says, let's go do it now. And the other 10 were like, we're scared. We're not going to. All right, so the application is one that you ought to give us some consideration, since we studied it to lead into next week where we talk about these tribes of Nephilims. There's clans of them. Now, I'm able to identify just off the top of my head 6 clans, 6 tribes. I have a book that has 36 of them listed.
Oh my gosh.
The tribes of Nephilim. Yeah. But we're going to study only 6. I'm not going to go through all 36. And we're going to talk about these Canaanite gods, because they're very important that we understand this. What's going on? Why does the battle against the giants is ethnic cleaning or cleansing and not genocide? We're going to have an answer for the people who tell us, you don't worship a God that's loving. Your God killed everything. We're going to understand what's going on, and he didn't kill everything. We're going to find out that it was very specific to specific tribes. And the other ones that they battled against became members of the family.
Yes.
Okay? Big difference here. All right, so that was a lot to cover in one day. I hope that you go back and use the notes here and kind of refresh yourself and go over the 12 tribes and what happened with them. And then ask yourself, how does this pertain to me today? You know, this application, Curtis says, you know, it's parallel to Christian life. Then look at it closer like that and see what you come up with. Okay, any questions or comments? No? I get to give you back 2 minutes to your life? Let's close in prayer then. Father, I thank you for this lesson this morning. Thank you, God, that we were able to accomplish the goal that you gave me last night and to set the tone and the direction of the 12 tribes and how Joshua and Caleb are examples for us, men of faith. And next week we learn how they went into battle and why that battle was so important. And then we'll figure out, Lord, how we apply that to our lives now with your Spirit helping and guiding us. May your Son be lifted up in Jesus' name. Amen.